Watch this.
Suddenly, there are several choices when it comes to school choice bills in the State House, and the latest seems to cover a lot of territory. Maybe marrying it to an already successful program will give it a step up.
If we are at conflict with those particular nations, those will not be allowed in the classroom. That's an obvious thing. So,
is it though? It wasn't so obvious during the introduction of the latest banning certain flags in schools bill. Oh, it's a beefed up bill, but without any muscle behind it.
This one is probably the biggest income tax cut in Idaho history.
We knew tax cuts were coming this session, but maybe you didn't expect the decimal point to be so far to the left. What does 0.04% look like to the average Idahoan? Well, just when we thought we'd be getting a united front, a single school choice tax credit bill, most lawmakers and the governor could get behind. Just 3 weeks in, and we've already seen 3 different versions get introduced. There was Representative Clint Hostetler's personal bill, which thought $250 million was a good price tag. Then yesterday, we saw Representative Wendy Horman bring her tax credit bill to the House Tax and Revenue Committee. $5,000 per student to cover the cost of education, including transportation and tuition, with a cap of $50 million. So it's a bit closer to the target. Then by yesterday afternoon, we saw another school choice bill introduced, this time in the Senate Education Committee. Aspen Shumpert looked into this one today, and it's kind of taking 2 ideas. Correct me if I'm wrong, Aspen, like taking 2 ideas, combining them into one. The money going to families is still there, but it's like squeezing out the tax credit part?
Yep, you're right. And it's going to take some work to do so, including making changes to the state's Empowering Parents programs and how those grant funds are going to be able to be used. Senator Dave Lent, the bill's sponsor, argues there's not a need to make a whole new system when lawmakers could instead expand one that already exists. Idaho's Empowering Parents program allows parents to apply for a grant of up to $1,000. Applications are open to all, but families who make less than $60,000 per year get first access to the funds. The money can be used to pay for state-approved devices, school materials, and tutoring. As it is now, the grant cannot be used for school tuition. Senator Lent wants to change that. He's proposing instead of putting $50 million towards school choice, legislators should allocate $30 million to special education in public schools, with the remaining $20 million added to the state's Empowering Parents program. That addition would boost the program's budget up to $50 million, allowing bigger grants to be awarded to parents. Senator Lent proposes upping the limit to $5,000 instead of the $1,000, but he also wants to revise the language to allow the state-funded grants to cover private school tuition.
The real problem we're facing in the state of Idaho, and the way I've been explaining it lately, is we have great educators, love our teachers, our administrators, but they're working in a box that was created over 100 years ago. By direction in our Constitution, it is our duty to establish a system of schools. And my charge to us, and as we move forward in this legislative process, is how do we reinvent that process so that our public schools can compete? If we want competition, let's level the playing field and let's reinvent this box and maybe turn it into a ball, take off some of those rough edges so that we can actually have benefit to all of the students in Idaho.
Senator Janie Ward Engelking opposed giving this bill a hearing because she says it sounds like a voucher program, an idea she doesn't support. But Senator Carrie Semmelroth says she voted to give it a hearing so there can be a discussion about accountability.
We were told by the governor during his address that he would support a bill that was fair, accountable, responsible, and transparent. But yet we don't have definitions on what those are. So now we get to decide what those definitions are. In order for us to meaningfully and thoughtfully engage in those discussions, we need to have bills that are attempting to do that. So at this time, I will vote to print this bill, knowing that we're talking about vouchers. But in order for us as a legislative body to get closer to agreeing on what we want fair, accountable, responsible, and transparent to look like, this is our starting point.
The bill says in order for a grant to be used on private school tuition, the school must meet certain requirements like maintaining enrollment and performance data, administration of standardized tests, and complying with special education laws. Those are just to name a few. Now, Brian, also included in this law is limiting the reporting requirements for public education. We heard this yesterday from Horman, eliminating those Title 33 rules that the state has and really just getting it down to the bare minimum of what those federal laws are. So that's a similarity between the two bills that were introduced yesterday.
Okay, so both of these kind of have some progress going forward. The personal bill probably is not going to go anywhere, but these two will at least get a hearing.
Right.
And then figure out what the public wants on these things.
Yep.
All right, we'll pay attention to that. Thank you very much, Aspen. Well, this is something that kind of slipped under the radar yesterday at the State House, probably because it happened right before the planned walkout over the resolution to dissolve same-sex marriage in the United States. Wednesday morning in the House State Affairs Committee, Representative Josh Tanner from Eagle stepped to the podium to introduce the fifth House concurrent resolution of the session. This one, to make it known, the 11th hour pardon President Biden issued for Dr. Anthony Fauci does not absolve him from being prosecuted for crimes in Idaho. And they want Dr. Fauci to know that.
In my opinion, what he had done was cause people's lives in Idaho. And this pardon that was granted to him it does not inspire confidence, one, to the people of Idaho, but I do want the people of Idaho to know, and this is what this is about, that just because he received this federal pardon does not mean that he cannot be prosecuted with Idaho with the crimes that he committed here.
President Biden said he gave Dr. Fauci the preemptive pardon, not as an acknowledgement of guilt of anything, but because of the consistent harassment and threat of retribution by the incoming administration. So what crimes might Dr. Fauci be accused of here in Idaho? Well, Representative Tanner noted the recommendations and practices Dr. Fauci pushed during the pandemic led to Idaho businesses being shut down, mass panic pumped into the people of Idaho, and the fact that he created distrust. Tanner also claimed Dr. Fauci suppressed life-saving drugs, those that showed great effectiveness in treating the virus and preventing severe illness. One can only assume he was alluding to ivermectin, which is not, in numerous studies, shown to be effective in treatment or prevention of COVID and still not approved by the FDA. Well, so far, there has not been any investigation or plans to prosecute Dr. Fauci in Idaho. But here's the thing. Even if there were, the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution clearly states any presidential pardon only applies to federal crimes, not state crimes, which is what I pointed out to Representative Crane this afternoon. The separation of jurisdiction is already clearly established.
Oh, it's already established. Great. So what's wrong with getting the news cycle out of it? What's wrong with introducing something and raising awareness about it?
No, we get this question all the time.
It's a resolution.
Yeah,
It's a resolution.
I get that, and we just get this question a lot from viewers and from voters. Like, why are we doing things that aren't necessary at the State House?
It is necessary. The guy lied to people, and we're letting the citizens of Idaho know, hey, just because there's been an announcement that this guy's gotten a pardon, one, we think that federal pardon's unconstitutional, and two, he's not been tried of any crimes in Idaho. And if he is, that pardon isn't going to apply.
Which we already know. Dr. Fauci already knows. Idahoans already know. Americans already know. But Idaho lawmakers still feel the need to get it put down on another piece of paper for political points maybe, or again, just to be part of the news cycle, I guess, for attention. Well, speaking of legislation without any real legs or teeth, Representative Ted Hill took another run at a flag bill. He's been trying to get one passed this session that would limit what kind of flag can be flown in a public school classroom. Basically, anything that represents a race or political view or sexual orientation or gender identity, not allowed. The first one made it through the House Education Committee, but today he brought it back with a little added bonus. House Bill 41 would add any foreign nation with which the United States is in hostile conflict. Those flags would not be allowed.
That's an obvious thing. So someone was anti-American, would swing the Chinese flag, we're at war with China. That made sense. That would probably be a concern. It was worth to bring it back for that item alone.
The question remains, are we at war with China? Are we in a hostile conflict with China? And when pressed, Representative Hill admitted, no, we are not. U.S. hasn't declared war since we entered World War II. Okay, so how this might apply to, say, I don't know, an AP comparative government class where students figuratively immerse themselves in a certain country to learn about how how maybe the Soviet Union was run or how Iran or China governs itself. Can that country's flag then be flown? Representative Hill doubled down on his conflict with China claim and then kind of doubled back on it.
Everyone's heard me say this many times. We are at war with China. How many times have I said that? In every possible way but kinetic. So if I had my choice, I would say no. But we are not in open hostilities with China. And then you could put the Chinese flag, you can put the Mexican flag up there, you can put the Iranian flag up there, you can put the North Korean flag up there. We are not in open hostilities. The only ones we're really actually fighting in the background, informationally and everything else, is with the North Koreans, the Russians, and the Chinese. We all are.
Okay, so the North Korean and Chinese flag would or would not be allowed? And what about my freak flag? Can I let that one fly? The Soviet Union flag, Representative Hill said that's a no-no because, after all, that represents communism. What about the display of the Confederate flag and what that represents? An Iranian flag might be okay, but not a back the blue flag? And who decides what foreign nation we are in conflict with at any certain time? Do we have to wait for World War III to be declared? So many questions, one of which was asked by Representative Dan Garner.
Does your bill outline who decides that? Is that the school board, or is that some other entity, or how is that decided?
Representative Hill.
Great question. But so this is the thing about this. There's only a shall in this bill. There's no repercussions. It's almost like I'm leaning on the reasonability and the patriotism, and the school board would decide that. What is the right thing to do? Because there's no penalty on this. People can go ahead and not follow this, and the school board's going to have to follow through.
So House Bill 41 carries no teeth, no penalty, and Representative Hill is just hoping people are going to be reasonable and patriotic about it. Perhaps the biggest question then, do we need a law to suggest people do the right thing? And if Representative Hill is just hoping school boards will handle it, why not just let them? Because if they haven't yet, maybe it's because it's really not an issue. And we tried to ask these questions of Representative Hill today, but we just couldn't coordinate a time when he was available. House Bill 41 was passed through the House, or through the committee, to the full House. By the way, another flag bill was introduced today by Representative Heather Scott to put more parameters on what flags can fly on state, county, or city buildings. So who knew flags were such a problem in Idaho? All right, well, let's round out a busy Thursday at the Capitol with, well, I guess a hat trick of money memos, right, Joe? That includes what could be, it's being called, the biggest income tax in state history, really?
Yeah, it appears to be that way. Of course, it's just a proposal right now, but if House Bill 40, sponsored by House Speaker Mike Moyle, does end up becoming law, it would cut millions of dollars in income tax. So, as a part of his three-part tax cut series, Moyle suggests an income tax cut rate. So the income tax in Idaho, it's a flat rate for all Idahoans, 5.695%. The legislation would take that down to a clean 5.3%. So legislation would also see the corporate income tax shoot down to the exact same amount, 5.3%, and those income tax cuts would cost in tax collections about $240 million. There are also provisions inside the legislation to expand income tax exemptions for military pensions and also capital gains or capital losses for precious metals, gold and silver. House Speaker Mike Moyle explained why he's doing this. Some are already wondering if it's too much of a cut.
That makes Idaho more competitive. It puts the money back in the citizens' pockets. It makes businesses that come here look to Idaho and say, all right, the rate's down farther. It's more competitive with other states. It is a draw for the state of Idaho, and it is good for all of our citizens who pay taxes.
I do have a serious question as to whether this much money is affordable, especially if we're going to look at the grocery tax, which I think is something that people want.
Remains to be seen, and if you like conversations about tax cuts, you're in luck because Moyle is also set to pitch a sales and property tax cut. Governor Brad Little hoped to see $100 million in cuts during the session, but Moyle wants to triple or quadruple that. And speaking of the speaker, he oversaw quite a debate on the House floor this morning. Lawmakers debated a concurrent resolution to help lawmakers donate all or part of their legislative pay to the tax relief fund. This all relates back to the raise that lawmakers are set to get. It was approved by a citizens committee late last year. That is, unless they reject the raise, which the Idaho Senate has already done. Some members of the House spoke passionately, though, about how inappropriate a legislative raise is at this point in time. We did hear from a few freshman lawmakers who said that they campaigned on being fiscally conservative and they can't accept a raise. House Majority Leader Jason Monks responded and kind of summed it up with this to say.
If you think that you individually, as an individual, are paid too much, or you think that raises are not appropriate, then take your money that you were getting and donate it to a tax relief fund back to the taxpayers. This is making it easier for you if you think that pay here is too much or raises are not deserved.
So you may be wondering, is there a legal mechanism that's preventing them from donating their money? No, there's nothing preventing Idaho lawmakers from just donating their pay to a good cause, anyone of their choice. But Representative Monk's trying to give them a mechanism to make it easier. And yes, the irony of lawmakers continuing to use taxpayer-funded time to debate all of this was pointed out. If you were wondering, by the way, Representative Chris Mathias did point out online recently, it costs Idaho taxpayers about $40,000 each day to convene the legislature. So they spent a good chunk of the House session talking about this. By the way, the House hasn't even taken up the Senate-approved pay rejection yet, and the clock is ticking. You may remember from our previous coverage, lawmakers have a limited window to reject a pay raise, 25 days. So they have about a week to figure this out. The legislation is in the House Ways and Means Committee as we speak. And Brian, that's just where that sits right now.
Yep. All right, lots of that to digest. Thank you very much, Joe. Well, DNA was the center of a court hearing for accused murderer Bryan Kohberger, a question about what will be allowed at trial and what won't. And we still don't have an answer from the city of Boise about what to do with the Interfaith Sanctuary's new shelter location, now that the state Supreme Court called their permit approval illegal. Abby Davis has that and more in today's 411.
Are we ready to go live? All right, go ahead.
After 5 hours of a closed hearing, we finally saw Bryan Kohberger back in court today for a hearing over DNA evidence. He's the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students more than 2 years ago. The hearing today is about investigative genetic genealogy, a method of identifying suspects in criminal cases. Kohberger's attorneys don't want IgG evidence used in trial because they say the way it was obtained violated his privacy rights. The state says defendants don't have a reasonable right to privacy when the DNA is found at a crime scene, so therefore they can use it. Either way, we won't know what the judge decides until later.
We're starting out by arresting more women in the first place, and then we're locking them up for almost twice as long as the national average for similar offenses.
Idaho is leading the nation in women's incarceration with a 5,000% increase since the 80s. That's according to a new report by the Idaho Justice Project. 62% of the state's incarcerated women are serving time for drug offenses, with more than half of those for possession. The Idaho Justice Project proposes solutions like expanding physical and mental health resources and re-entry support for women leaving prison.
We will do what we can to prevent encampments and the problems we've seen in other cities. High priority for all of us. That means shelter is a big part of that.
We asked Boise Mayor Lauren McLean what the city is going to do after the Idaho Supreme Court's decision involving Interfaith Sanctuary dropped yesterday. She said the city's legal team is still reviewing the Supreme Court's decision and says they will discuss the implications of the case soon. That's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
Beautiful shots of some sundogs captured at the top of Bogus Basin. It has been some beautiful days the last couple of days. Beautiful conditions for hitting the slopes. Lots of blue sky. Of course, the only fresh snow is what's man-made up there these days. And we had a really nice day here in the Treasure Valley. These were our observed high temperatures. We hit the 40s from Ontario all the way out into Boise. Even Baker City, Oregon hit 42 degrees this afternoon. We still have mostly clear skies overhead, and temperatures are starting to slide as we inch closer to that 5:44 sunset this evening. 39 degrees in Boise right now. We've had light southerly winds. That's what has helped propel those temperatures into slightly above average territory. Tomorrow we'll still be up near 40 degrees in the valley, but we bring a cold wind into the mix, and potentially, courtesy of a cold front that will drop in from the north overnight tonight, potentially a few snow flurries early in the morning tomorrow, and some clouds overnight as well, which will keep our temperatures in the mid-20s tomorrow morning, a little warmer than we've been. We'll have sunshine after those flurries move through in the morning, and then I'm watching late Friday night into very early Saturday morning for another quick round of snow flurries in the valleys and potentially some light accumulating snow in the mountains during the day tomorrow as that system comes in. But when I say light snow, we're talking maybe in places like Stanley and Sun Valley, half an inch or less. Here in the valleys tomorrow, I think the bigger headline is the wind, upper 30s with that wind. It'll feel very brisk throughout your Friday. That system clears out over the weekend. Temperatures will drop, and then sunshine and dry conditions take over all the way through next week.
We got a flurry of comments today. Let's get to as many as we can here in the last 90 seconds or so, beginning with Dale here. Brian, I just want to say I trusted Dr. Fauci more than anything the government or the state was putting out about COVID. Get a grip. The man saved lives and they want to prosecute him? I'll get real, says Dale. Then there's this one here from Mark Peterson in Middleton. I'm quite tired of our legislature snake dancing with right-wing socialism, private schools, failed federal lawsuits, unborn super citizens, Fauci revenge. Just do your darn job and report to all your constituents. It seems to be the sentiment we're getting a lot these days. If there are shortfalls in the education budget already, especially with the possible voucher program, how will the suggested tax cuts affect those funds? Fuzzy math, asked Karen. If the tax cut and the tax credit bill go through, that's $290 million out of the general fund. That's what that does. In Idaho, you can't run America without taxes, and then the taxpayers coughing up $40,000 a day for creation of laws to punish citizens and roll back safeguards that keep our planet healthy? That's what Larry wants to know. Hey, why doesn't our legislator fully fund education before they consider tax returns? That's what Jim from Meridian wants to know. And they've already been found by the state Supreme Court that they haven't fully funded education. They did that back in 2005. Hey, Lefty, let's rename the 208 to Let's Mock Legislators. I kind of like the alliteration, but we're going to have to workshop that one a little bit more. We'll get back to you.